just wanted to be of service somewhere. And so I went back to the open vacancy report, and sure enough, there it was, religious affairs NCO. And this time there was 2 slots open. One of them was an E6 and one of them was an E5. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put in for both. I'll put in for the E6 slot. And then I was advised to put in for the 5 slot, so I put in for both. And I got picked up in the 5 slot, and they said, yeah, come on over. We need religious affairs. So imagine my surprise where I show up to my unit as a brand new religious affairs NCO. And I walk in the door and I say, hey, I'm Sergeant Skinner or whatever. And they're like, oh, you're the chaplain's assistant. Nice to meet you. And this guy was old school, so he sounded just like me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did he just call me?
Yeah.
I'm not anybody's assistant.
Yeah.
I'm a religious affairs NCO. What does a chaplain's assistant mean?
Yeah.
Little did I know that they hadn't been updated on the regulations, because in 2015, the regulation changed from chaplain's assistant. The naming convention moved from chaplain's assistant to religious affairs specialist. If you were the rank of an NCO, you were referred to as a religious affairs NCO. Mm-hmm. And so to this day in the Army, I was on the phone 2 days ago talking to a unit, providing some advisement, and the person on the phone, right, who hasn't been in the Army nearly as long as I have, was talking about the chaplain's assistant. And I said, I will correct everybody vehemently, because it's been 10 years since the Army changed it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like an officer just letting something fly if 10 years ago I'm still using an old naming convention on a flight system or a vehicle system? Like, no. Yeah. So the naming convention changed, I believe, in part to put us more in line with like public affairs, mortuary affairs, more religious affairs. And in reality, we aren't assisting the chaplain as much as we are advising the chaplain. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the chaplain corps. I am not a chaplain. I have no desire to be a chaplain. Mm-hmm. But I support chaplains. I support command teams, and I support the soldiers who are our number one asset to be able to do the simple task, and I say that lightly, of fighting and winning America's wars. And if we don't have spiritually fit soldiers, we don't have lethal soldiers. And the Army believes that so much that it's a part of the H2F system, which is known as also their health and holistic fitness. It essentially says there's five realms of fitness that are absolutely necessary for soldiers to win and fight America's wars. So you need to be physically fit, you need to be spiritually fit, you need to be nutritionally fit, mentally fit, and I think sleep. Mm-hmm. You have to have sleep fitness to some extent. Yeah. And I'm hoping I'm not getting those wrong, because I'm supposed to be an expert in those, but H2F is kind of the area, and spiritual fitness is one of the realms. And so it's educating a lot of soldiers and command teams that spiritual fitness doesn't mean religion. You can have a religion or no religion at all, and the Army dictates, they essentially say, like, every soldier has to have some level of spiritual fitness to be successful in the battlefield. Mm-hmm. What is it that keeps Ethan able to continue to pull triggers when his battle buddies just went down? Mm-hmm. What is it that keeps that soldier grounded to the point where at the peak of stress, they can receive and internalize a command team directive or mission to be able to go back out and execute when things are harder than they ever have been before? For some soldiers, it is God or whatever they make of that, right? Mm-hmm. For some soldiers, it is their ability to practice something that keeps them centered or that brings them back to where they're good. Whether that's meditation. For some soldiers, it's physical fitness is a form of spiritual fitness, right? Mm-hmm. It gives them a release. It builds them back up. They feel stronger. They feel better. They feel energized. Spiritual fitness isn't one thing, but it's essential that you have identified what it is that makes you happy and keeps you fulfilled and keeps you grounded, so that when the nation needs you to, you can continue to execute. And I'll tell you, on my deployment from 23 to 24, we were deployed stateside, but we were gone for 13 months. When we were in pre-mob, a chaplain was addressing the group of us that were about to go downrange, so to speak. And he said, a spiritually fit soldier is a lethal soldier. And I thought it was the cheesiest, most overblown, most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. And I actually laughed at it. I'm the religious affairs NC. I'm like, okay, that's a little heavy-handed, chaplain. What are you talking about? A little did I know I was going to fully understand what he was talking about, because I got to meet soldiers who, they were so just defeated by the monotony of the mission that we were doing. And by defeated, I mean they just didn't see a purpose. They didn't see the why. They couldn't keep the end state in perspective. Yeah. They were making decisions that were harmful not only to themselves, but maybe to their families, their command teams, their battle buddies, or their spheres of influence. And I had to have multiple conversations with soldiers. One of them, I was like, the soldier was talking about legitimately just abandoning post. I had multiple conversations about that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm leaving.
And trying to convince soldiers of all ranks, of all leadership levels, to just keep themselves grounded. Because for some of them, there wasn't a level of spiritual fitness that gave them that like total person fulfillment to be able to say, look, I realize things are bad, but I am going to continue to be good. I'm going to continue to sustain. I'm going to continue to be able to hit reset because I use A, B, and C, and D to recenter, refocus, re-energize. A lot of these soldiers couldn't do that. They didn't have it. And so I thought back to that chaplain, a spiritually fit soldier is a lethal soldier. Fast forward to this last fall, I was sitting in jury duty. Ultimately wasn't selected, thank God. But I had nothing to do. So I pulled out on an iPad, I pulled out the health and holistic fitness, the H2F regulation. And I was reading it all the way through the document. What else are you going to do in jury duty, right? Like just read an Army reg, right? Or doctrine, I guess. And I'm reading through it, and it just says, I keep finding a word in all of the sections. So whether it's about physical fitness or sleep or nutrition, the word lethality keeps running through the document. Lethality. And it dawned on me. Every one of these 5 elements, it's a pentagon, right? It's all about lethality. It's the only thing that matters. Can we sustain the war fighter to be lethal? And once I started talking to soldiers about lethality, the light would go off for some of them for why H2F was important. They would start to view spiritual fitness in a different way, right? Maybe it's a walk on the beach. Maybe it's a read of a book. Maybe it's a swing in a hammock, like something that centers you. Maybe it's praying, right? Talking to God, reading whatever text is sacred to you. That keeps you grounded. And so the Chaplain Corps has really allowed me to be able to, what we do there really is provide and advise. We provide for the warfighter. We advise for the command teams, right? And we give them, we give soldiers confidential space to be able to come to us with literally anything that they need to talk about. You have different staff sections, right? Like legal, JAG. You've got behavioral health. You've got medics. And then you typically have your unit ministry team or the UMT, your chaplain section, whatever, it's called all sorts of things. What the Chaplain Corps that separates us is clergy privilege. It's absolute ironclad, full-blown confidentiality. So you come to me and you say something in terms of, hey, such and such soldier maybe sexually assaulted me, or I've got some thoughts about hurting some people, right? I can't share that information with anyone no matter how badly I may want to scream it on a rooftop, because it's clergy privilege. It is protected communication.
Yeah.
It is absolute ironclad, unless you were to release your confidentiality in writing very specifically. And so the Army has said we have to have a place where soldiers can go and say anything and everything they need to, free of fear of reprisal.
Yeah.
And so the confidentiality piece is like this blessing, because I've had conversations with soldiers that are like really hard. And it's a curse, because sometimes you wish that you didn't hear what you just heard. And occasionally you end up then walking amongst people who now you have heard things about.
Yeah.
And they don't know that.
Yeah.
Nothing's different to them. And you can't treat them differently. You can't operate differently, because they could come to you to exercise confidentiality or for advice. So typically what we do is we advise on issues of morals, morale, ethics, and religion. A lot of the time religion is kind of like, it's an afterthought. I would say on like the National Guard, like it's not an afterthought, but we're advising on ethics, morals, and morale. Religion is just kind of something that is in the background.
Yeah.
We advise on it when it becomes relevant or to the surface. So if a soldier has a religious accommodation request, COVID-19 request, for example, they didn't want to get the vaccination, they could fill out a religious accommodation, a medical accommodation. Well, now we're advising on the sincerity of these requests.
Yeah.
Right. If it's Ramadan, for example, we're advising command teams on what they need to consider when it comes to like taking soldiers and maybe putting them on different shifts if they're in their annual training window. We might be advising them on major holidays that are coming up that could impact their formations, and make it so their command teams need to start to consider maybe like, hey, do these people need to go to synagogue, temple, church, whatever it happens to be, right? So in an operational environment, we may be meeting with a designated faith group leader of like a community, a village, and trying to build bridges and relationships so that we can continue the mission forward while having the trust and backing of a religious spokesperson in the community.
Yeah.
Right. And so we'll do, religious area assessments, right, for example. So it's a super, super, super dynamic position. And it's one in which the enlisted member of the unit ministry team works side by side with the chaplain.
Yeah.
Right. The chaplain, they can provide pastoral care and counseling. They can perform religious services.
Yeah.
Christian service, Muslim service, Jewish service, doesn't matter. They're effectively a staff officer as well, right? But the enlisted service member, so my counterparts, there's nothing else really that I've been able to find in the regulations that sets us apart from a chaplain. So if a chaplain's not there, we are operating in place of the chaplain. We are the voice of morals, morale, ethics, and religion when the chaplain is absent or not around. Sometimes a command team or certain people might ask us for our opinion in addition to or before or in lieu of the chaplain's opinion, because they understand that they need to ask the enlisted voice for the enlisted perspective. So it's a super dynamic position because we get to advise command teams, we get to advise soldiers, we get to care for the soul of the Army, which is it's the best job I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I got to shoot tanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like this is on such a so for me coming to the chaplain, and I had people, I swear like a sailor.
Yeah.
I could talk the tank talk with the best of them, right? This is definitely where I've wanted to be, and it's that fulfillment that I get in my career that I've been able to have that has allowed me to sustain some pretty tough times. Like chaplains aren't perfect people, right? And I've had some bad experiences with some chaplains, and I've had some tremendously wonderful experiences. Just like any profession, there's good and bad on both ends, right? Yeah. But I continue to stay because there's command teams that need a place to speak themselves, and there's command teams that say, hey, we need to give our soldiers a place to be heard. And it's just such a privilege and an honor to be able to like be in the chaplain corps. And we're a small corps. And so there's just a lot of people that don't know what we do or understand that, like, you know, I have the same confidentiality that a chaplain does. So if you don't want to meet with your chaplain, you can go to the religious affairs specialist or NCO assigned to that chaplain and exercise the exact same confidentiality. And it's different from what behavioral health or medical or legal have, because they will be mandatory reporters if certain things are said. For us, you must release the confidentiality.